The crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow across the crowded living room of the Hawthorne mansion. Sophia stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames a stark contrast to the chill she felt inside. She clutched a flute of champagne, the bubbles tickling her nose as she took a sip to calm her nerves. The buzz of Vancouver's elite mingling around her felt distant, as if she were underwater. At 40 Sophia Hawthorne had long ago resigned herself to being known simply as Jackson's wife. Her own dreams of becoming an architect had faded into obscurity, overshadowed by her husband's towering success in the real estate world. Tonight, more than ever, she felt like a mere prop in the grand production that was Jackson's life. The scent of pine from the enormous Christmas tree mixed with the aroma of mulled wine, creating a festive atmosphere that only heightened Sophia's sense of disconnect. She smoothed down her designer dress, the silk cool against her skin, and plastered on a smile as another guest approached. "There she is, my beautiful wife." Jackson's booming voice cut through the chatter as he approached, his arm draped around the shoulder of a silver-haired man Sophia vaguely recognized as a city councilman. "Sophia, darling, you remember Mr. Thornton, don't you?" Sophia nodded, forcing a polite smile. "Of course, it's lovely to see you again, Mr. Thornton." "The pleasure's all mine, Mrs. Hawthorne," the councilman replied, his eyes barely registering her presence before turning back to Jackson. "Now, about that waterfront development." As the two men launched into a discussion about zoning laws and property values, Sophia felt herself fading into the background once more. She excused herself, drifting through the crowd like a ghost, refilling glasses and ensuring everyone was comfortable. It was a role she had perfected over the years, the consummate hostess, always smiling, always accommodating. Just before midnight, Jackson clinked his glass, calling for everyone's attention. Sophia's stomach tightened. She knew what was coming. "Friends, colleagues, esteemed guests," Jackson began, his charismatic smile lighting up the room. "Thank you all for joining us in celebrating another fantastic year. Your support has been instrumental in making Hawthorne Developments the leader in sustainable luxury living across British Columbia." A smattering of applause filled the room. Sophia clapped along, her smile fixed in place. "Of course, I couldn't have done it without my rock, my better half," Jackson continued, gesturing towards Sophia. She felt dozens of eyes turn to her, and she straightened her posture, bracing herself. "Sophia, darling, come up here." With practiced grace, Sophia glided to Jackson's side, accepting his arm around her waist. She could smell the whiskey on his breath as he leaned in close. "You know, folks," Jackson said, his voice dropping conspiratorially, "Sophia here actually studied architecture back in the day. Can you believe it?" A low chuckle rippled through the crowd. "But let me tell you, her real talent lies in throwing one hell of a party. I mean, just look at this spread." The laughter grew louder, and Sophia felt her cheeks burning. She maintained her smile, but inside, something cracked. "To Sophia," Jackson raised his glass, "the best party planner and the most supportive wife a man could ask for." As the guests echoed the toast, Sophia's vision blurred. The chandelier lights seemed to dim, the laughter muffled as if she were underwater. She excused herself, citing the need to check on dessert, and retreated to the kitchen. Leaning against the cool marble counter, Sophia took a deep breath. She caught her reflection in the polished surface of the refrigerator. Impeccably styled hair, designer dress, flawless makeup. But her eyes looked hollow. For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to truly feel the weight of her disappointment. The bright-eyed architecture student from the University of Toronto seemed like a stranger now, a ghost of a life unlived. As the sounds of the party filtered through the kitchen door, Sophia made a silent promise to herself. This would be the last Christmas she spent in the shadows. Something had to change. The morning after the party, Sophia sat in her home office, surrounded by the remnants of last night's celebration. Gift wrap and ribbon scraps littered the floor, a tangible reminder of the hollow festivities. She cradled a mug of coffee, its bitter aroma a welcome jolt to her senses. Her gaze drifted to the far corner of the room, where a drafting table stood draped in a sheet. With slow, deliberate steps, she approached it, setting down her mug and reaching out to pull away the cover. A cloud of dust rose, making her cough. The table was exactly as she'd left it years ago, her final project from university still pinned to its surface. Sophia ran her fingers over the faded lines of the sustainable community center she'd designed, remembering the pride and excitement she'd felt upon its completion. What happened to that girl? She whispered to herself, tracing the contours of her old dreams. As she stood there, lost in thought, a knock at the door startled her. It was Maria, their housekeeper, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who had been with them for years. "Mrs. Hawthorne, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a call for you. It's your sister, Emily." Sophia frowned. She and Emily hadn't spoken in months, their relationship strained by distance and diverging life paths. "Thank you, Maria. I'll take it in here." Picking up the phone, Sophia braced herself. "Emily, is everything okay?" Her sister's voice came through, tight with emotion. "Soph, it's Dad. He's in the hospital. They're saying it might be his heart." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sophia gripped the edge of her desk, her mind racing. "I'm on my way," she said, already moving to pack a bag. As she threw clothes into a suitcase, Sophia's thoughts whirled. Her father, once so strong and vibrant, now lying in a hospital bed, and she, his architect daughter, reduced to planning parties and playing the perfect wife. What would he think if he could see her now? Jackson appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed in concern. "Sophia, what's going on?" She explained the situation quickly, watching as Jackson's expression shifted from concern to mild annoyance. "You know we have the Hendersons' New Year's gala coming up," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I really need you here for that." Sophia stared at him, incredulous. "My father is in the hospital, Jackson. The gala can wait." Of course," he backpedaled, looking chastened. "I'm sorry. Do you want me to come with you?" For a moment, Sophia considered it, but the thought of navigating her family drama with Jackson in tow felt overwhelming. "No, I think it's best if I go alone. I'll call you when I know more." As she drove to the airport, Sophia's mind drifted back to her university days. She thought of her father's pride when she'd gotten into the architecture program, his unwavering support even when she'd decided to marry Jackson instead of pursuing her career. The flight to Toronto was a blur of anxiety and regret. By the time Sophia reached the hospital, she felt like a coil wound too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Emily was waiting outside their father's room, her face pale and drawn. The sisters embraced, years of distance melting away in the face of shared worry. "How is he?" Sophia asked, peering through the window at the frail figure in the hospital bed. Emily sighed. "Stable for now. They're running tests. But Soph, he's been asking for you. Keeps talking about some building you designed in school." Sophia's heart clenched. "The community center project," she whispered. As she entered the room, her father's eyes lit up. "There's my girl," he said, his voice weak but warm. "Tell me, Sophia, did you ever build that center? The one with the green roof and the solar panels?" Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. "No, Dad, I never did." He reached out, taking her hand in his. "It's not too late, you know. You've always had such a gift. The world needs more buildings that care about people and the planet." In that moment, looking into her father's eyes, Sophia felt something shift inside her. A long-dormant spark reignited, fueled by love, regret, and the sudden, fierce desire to make her father proud. As she sat by his bedside, holding his hand and listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, Sophia made a decision. It was time to step out of the shadows and reclaim her dreams. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Sophia was done living a life that felt like a pale imitation of her true self. The new year was approaching, and with it, the promise of change. Sophia Hawthorne was ready to build something new, not just in the world, but within herself. The bustling cafe was a far cry from the stuffy cocktail parties Sophia had grown accustomed to. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and warm pastries filled the air, mingling with the excited chatter of patrons. Sophia sat at a small table by the window, nervously adjusting her simple blouse, a deliberate departure from her usual designer attire. Her father's words echoed in her mind as she waited. He was recovering slowly, but his brush with mortality had lit a fire under Sophia. She'd reached out to Elena, an old university friend now working in community development, and arranged this meeting. When Elena walked in, Sophia almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the carefree art student she remembered. In her place stood a confident professional, her curly hair cropped short and her eyes sparkling with purpose. "Sophia!" Elena exclaimed, pulling her into a warm embrace. "God, it's been too long." As they settled into their seats, Sophia felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. What could she possibly say about her life that wouldn't sound pathetic compared to whatever Elena had been up to? But as Elena began to speak, Sophia found herself captivated. Her old friend was now a community developer based in Montreal, working on projects that blended architecture with social impact. "It's challenging work," Elena admitted, stirring her latte. "But seeing the difference we make in these neighborhoods, it's incredible, Soph. Remember how we used to talk about changing the world through design? That's what this feels like." Sophia nodded, a bittersweet smile playing on her lips. "I remember. Sounds like you're living the dream we both had." Elena tilted her head, studying Sophia. "What about you? Last I heard, you were working for that big firm in Toronto. How's that going?" Sophia's cheeks flushed. She took a deep breath and decided to be honest. "I never took that job, Elena. I got married instead, to Jackson Hawthorne." "The real estate mogul?" Elena's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, Soph, that's quite a change from what you had planned." Sophia stared into her coffee, shame washing over her. "It just sort of happened. And now?" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the hollow existence she'd been living. But Elena reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Hey, it's okay. Life takes us on unexpected paths sometimes, but it's never too late to course correct." Something in Elena's words struck a chord. Sophia found herself opening up, pouring out years of pent-up frustration and regret. To her surprise, Elena listened without judgment, offering understanding and encouragement. "You know," Elena said thoughtfully as Sophia finished speaking, "we're actually looking to expand our work to the West Coast. Have you ever considered getting back into architecture, but from a community development angle?" Sophia's heart raced at the idea. I wouldn't even know where to start. It's been so long." "Start small," Elena suggested. "Why don't you come up with a proposal for a project here in Vancouver? Something that addresses a real need in the community. If it's good, I could present it to my organization as a potential collaboration." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Sophia thought of her recent sketch, of the long dormant passion it had awakened. I could try," she said hesitantly. As they said their goodbyes, Sophia felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. On the drive home, her mind raced with possibilities. She thought of the neglected neighborhood near the Hawthorne Development's office, of the families struggling to maintain a sense of community amidst rapid gentrification. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the seed of an idea had taken root. Sophia hurried to her office, pulled out her old textbooks, and began to research. She worked through the night, sketching and planning, her enthusiasm growing with each passing hour. As dawn broke, Sophia sat back, surveying the rough outlines of her project. It was far from perfect, but it was a start. A real, tangible step towards reclaiming her passion and her identity. She thought of Jackson, still asleep upstairs, unaware of the transformation beginning in his wife. For a moment, guilt and fear threatened to overwhelm her. But then she looked at her work, at the potential it held to make a real difference, and her resolve strengthened. This project would be her secret for now, a private rebellion against the constraints of her gilded cage. But someday soon, Sophia promised herself. She would step out of the shadows and into the light of her own making. Weeks passed, and Sophia threw herself into her secret project with renewed vigor. She converted a rarely used guest room into a makeshift office, filling it with blueprints, material samples, and stacks of research on sustainable architecture and community development. The work was exhilarating, but the constant need for secrecy was taking its toll. Sophia found herself making excuses for her absences, inventing meetings with charity organizations, or fabricating shopping trips to explain her time away from home. One afternoon, as she pored over zoning regulations for her proposed site, a knock at the door made her jump. It was Maria, the housekeeper, with a concerned look on her face. "Mrs. Hawthorne. Mr. Hawthorne is on the phone. He says it's urgent." Sophia's heart raced as she picked up the receiver. "Jackson, what's wrong?" "Sophia, where are you?" Jackson's voice was tight with frustration. "The Andersons are here for our lunch meeting, the one we've had planned for weeks." Sophia's stomach dropped. She'd completely forgotten. "I'm so sorry, Jackson. I lost track of time. I'll be there as soon as I can." As she rushed to get ready, Sophia caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her hair was disheveled. There were ink smudges on her hands, and her eyes were bright with a passion she hadn't seen in years. For a moment, she barely recognized herself. The lunch was tense, with Jackson shooting her questioning glances throughout. Sophia did her best to play the role of the perfect hostess, but her mind kept drifting back to her project. Later that evening, as they prepared for bed, Jackson finally broached the subject. "Sophia, what's going on with you lately? You seem distracted." Sophia hesitated, torn between the desire to share her excitement and the fear of Jackson's reaction. "I've just been busy with some personal projects," she said evasively. Jackson frowned. "Personal projects? Like what?" "Just exploring some old interests," Sophia replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Nothing for you to worry about." But Jackson wasn't satisfied. "Is this about your father? I know his health scare shook you up, but..." "It's not about my father," Sophia interrupted, a note of irritation creeping into her voice. "Can't I just have something for myself without it being a problem?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken tension. Jackson looked taken aback, then hurt. "Of course you can," he said finally. I feel like I hardly know what's going on with you anymore." Guilt and frustration warred within Sophia. Part of her longed to share her excitement, to tell Jackson about the project that was rekindling her passion. But another part, the part that remembered years of dismissal and condescension, held her back. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I know I've been distant lately. I'm just figuring some things out." Jackson nodded slowly, clearly unsatisfied but unwilling to push further. As he turned out the light, Sophia lay awake, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't keep her project a secret forever. But how could she explain to Jackson that the life they'd built together suddenly felt suffocating? As the weeks wore on, Sophia's project began to take shape. She'd identified an abandoned warehouse in the east side that could be converted into a community center, complete with job training facilities, a daycare, and a rooftop garden. The design incorporated cutting-edge sustainable technologies, a nod to her university project that had so inspired her father. One Saturday morning, Sophia slipped out early, telling Jackson she was meeting friends for brunch. Instead, she drove to the east side, determined to get a feel for the neighborhood her project would serve. As she walked the streets, notebook in hand, Sophia felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. She chatted with local shopkeepers, played with children in a rundown park, and listened to the concerns of longtime residents facing displacement due to gentrification. It was during one of these conversations that she met Elena, a single mother of 3 who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. As they chatted over coffee in a rundown local diner, Elena's eyes lit up with hope as Sophia described her plans for the center. "You really think this could change things for us?" Elena asked, a mix of skepticism and longing in her voice. Sophia nodded firmly. "I do. But more importantly, I think it will give you the tools to change things for yourselves. This center isn't just about a building. It's about empowering the community." As she spoke, Sophia felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. This, she realized, was what she had been missing. The ability to make a real difference, to use her skills and passion to improve lives. Driving home that evening, Sophia's mind was buzzing with ideas and possibilities. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice Jackson's car in the driveway. With a start, she realized she was over 2 hours late for dinner. Taking a deep breath, Sophia steeled herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. As she walked through the front door, she made a silent promise to herself. No more lies, no more hiding. It was time to be honest with Jackson about who she really was, and who she wanted to become. As Sophia stepped into the foyer, the silence in the house was deafening. She found Jackson in the kitchen, methodically cleaning dishes that had long since gone cold. The set of his shoulders told her everything she needed to know about his mood. "Jackson, she began, but he cut her off. "Save it, Sophia." His voice was tight, controlled. "I think we both know that brunch with friends was a lie." Sophia's heart sank. She set her bag down and leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "You're right. I'm sorry for lying. I should have been honest with you." Jackson turned to face her, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why weren't you? What's going on, Sophia? Because this isn't you." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "That's just it, Jackson," she said softly. "This is me. The real me. The one I've been hiding for years." Over the next hour, perched on bar stools at the kitchen island, Sophia told Jackson everything. She spoke of her rekindled passion for architecture, her secret project, and the sense of purpose she'd found in the East Side community. As she talked, she could see the emotions playing across Jackson's face. Surprise, hurt, and something that looked almost like fear. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked when she'd finished. "Did you think I wouldn't support you?" Sophia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Honestly, I wasn't sure. For years, you've been so dismissive of my interest in architecture. Remember last Christmas, when you joked about it in front of all our guests?" Jackson had the grace to look ashamed. "I didn't realize it meant so much to you. I thought you were happy with our life." "Parts of it, yes," Sophia admitted. "But I've been feeling lost, unfulfilled. This project, it's given me a sense of purpose I haven't had in years." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Jackson spoke. "So, what happens now?" Sophia took a deep breath. "I want to see this through. I need to. But I don't want to lose us in the process. Can you try to understand?" Jackson nodded slowly. "I can try. But Sophia, you have to promise me. No more lies. If we're going to make this work, we need to be honest with each other." As they went to bed that night, both emotionally drained, Sophia felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The road ahead would be challenging, but at least now they were facing it together. Over the next few weeks, Sophia threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, no longer burdened by the need for secrecy. She spent long hours refining her designs, meeting with community members, and navigating the complex world of zoning laws and building permits. Jackson, true to his word, made efforts to engage with Sophia's project. He asked questions about her designs, offered connections in the city planning office, and even accompanied her on a tour of the proposed site. But Sophia could sense his unease, the way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke too long about sustainable materials or community engagement strategies. One evening, as Sophia worked late into the night, she overheard a phone conversation that made her blood run cold. "I'm telling you, Frank, she's like a different person." Jackson's voice drifted from his study. "I barely recognize her anymore. No, of course I want her to be happy, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if we want the same things anymore." Sophia's heart raced as she silently retreated to her office. The doubt in Jackson's voice echoed her own fears. Were they growing apart? Could their marriage survive this transformation? As she stared at the plans spread across her desk, Sophia felt torn between two worlds. The safe, familiar life she'd built with Jackson, and the exciting, purposeful future she glimpsed through her work. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider a terrifying question. What if she couldn't have both? Months passed, and Sophia's project gained momentum. Her proposal had been approved by Elena's organization, securing crucial funding and support. The abandoned warehouse was slowly transforming, its brick walls coming alive with the promise of new beginnings. But as her professional life flourished, Sophia's personal life grew increasingly strained. Jackson's initial attempts at support had given way to thinly veiled resentment. He worked later, attended more business dinners, leaving Sophia to navigate her new world largely alone. One crisp autumn morning, Sophia stood on the scaffolding of her building site, surveying the progress. The community center was taking shape, its eco-friendly design a testament to her vision. Elena, who had become both a friend and a vital community liaison, climbed up to join her. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Elena said, wonder in her voice. "You're actually pulling this off." Sophia smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "We're pulling it off. This project belongs to all of us." As they discussed the upcoming job training programs the center would offer, Sophia's phone buzzed insistently. It was Jackson. "Sophia, where are you?" His voice was tight with anger. "The Andersons are here for the charity gala planning meeting. The one you promised you wouldn't forget." Sophia's stomach dropped. In her excitement over the project milestone, she'd completely forgotten about the meeting. "Jackson, I'm so sorry. Save it," he cut her off. "Just get here as soon as you can." The drive home was tense, Sophia's mind racing with excuses and apologies. But as she walked into the living room and saw the disappointment in Jackson's eyes, the words died on her lips. The meeting was awkward, with Sophia struggling to focus on seating arrangements and menu selections, while her mind kept drifting back to the construction site. Mrs. Anderson, ever perceptive, noticed the tension. "Is everything all right, dear?" she asked Sophia quietly as they looked over flower arrangements. "You seem distracted?" Sophia forced a smile. "Everything's fine. Just a bit overwhelmed with all the planning." But Mrs. Anderson wasn't easily fooled. She glanced between Sophia and Jackson, noting the distance between them. "You know," she said gently, "it's okay to want different things sometimes. The trick is finding a way to want them together." The words stayed with Sophia long after the Andersons had left. That night, as she and Jackson prepared for bed in silence, she knew they couldn't go on like this. "We need to talk," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Really talk." Jackson sighed, running a hand through his hair. "What's left to say, Sophia? You've made it clear where your priorities lie." "That's not fair," Sophia protested. "I'm trying to balance both worlds. I thought you understood how important this project is to me." "I'm trying to understand," Jackson said, his voice rising. "But it feels like you're building a whole new life without me. The Sophia I married wouldn't have forgotten about commitments, wouldn't have lied." "The Sophia you married was half a person," Sophia shot back, years of frustration bubbling to the surface. "I lost myself in your world, Jackson. I became nothing more than your wife, the perfect hostess. This project, it's helping me remember who I really am." They stared at each other, both shocked by the intensity of her outburst. In the silence that followed, Sophia could almost hear the foundations of their marriage creaking under the strain. "I don't know how to fix this," Jackson said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I don't know either. But I know I can't go back to who I was before. I won't." As they lay in bed that night, backs turned to each other, Sophia's mind raced. She thought of the community center, of the lives it would change. She thought of Jackson, of the life they'd built together. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where those two worlds might not coexist. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't continue to live with one foot in each world. It was time to fully commit to her path, wherever it might lead. With a heavy heart but a sense of resolve, she began to pack a bag. As she zipped up the suitcase, Sophia took a deep breath. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. She was done living in the shadows. It was time to step fully into the light of her own making, even if it meant leaving behind the life she'd known. The early morning sun cast long shadows across the bedroom as Sophia zipped up her suitcase. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the note she'd written for Jackson, explaining her need for space to figure things out. As she placed it on his pillow, she heard a sound behind her. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" Sophia turned to find Jackson standing in the doorway, his face a mask of hurt and confusion. She hadn't expected him to be awake this early. "Jackson, she began, but the words caught in her throat. He stepped into the room, his eyes moving from the suitcase to the note on the bed. "Were you even going to say goodbye?" The pain in his voice made Sophia's heart ache. "I thought it would be easier this way," she admitted softly. "Easier for whom?" Jackson asked, his voice tight with emotion. "Sophia, we've been married for 15 years. Don't we owe each other more than this?" Sophia sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "You're right. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. How to be the person I'm becoming and still be your wife." Jackson sat beside her, careful to maintain a small distance between them. "And you think leaving is the answer?" "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "But I know I can't keep living this double life. It's not fair to you, and it's tearing me apart." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history and uncertain future hanging heavy between them. Finally, Jackson spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other night, about losing yourself in my world." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I never meant for that to happen, Sophia. I thought I was giving you the life you wanted." Sophia turned to look at him, really look at him, for what felt like the first time in years. She saw the lines of worry etched around his eyes, the gray starting to pepper his hair. "I know you did," she said softly. "And for a while, maybe it was. But I need more now. I need to know who I am outside of being your wife." Jackson nodded slowly. "I understand that. I do. But Sophia, does that have to mean leaving? Can't we try to figure this out together?" Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I don't know if we can... Jackson, be honest. Are you really okay with the person I'm becoming? With the work I'm doing?" He was quiet for a long moment, and Sophia could see him wrestling with the truth. "I'm trying to be," he said finally. "It's not easy. This new you, she scares me a little, but I don't want to lose you." Sophia reached out, taking his hand in hers. "I don't want to lose you either, but I can't go back to who I was before. I won't." Jackson squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to, but maybe we can find a way forward together, if you're willing to try." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sophia and Jackson talked more openly than they had in years. They spoke of fears and hopes, of resentments and regrets. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when both of them wondered if the gulf between them had grown too wide to bridge. But as morning turned to afternoon, a tentative plan began to take shape. Sophia would move into the guest house on their property for a while, giving her the space she needed while still keeping them connected. Jackson would make a real effort to engage with her work, to understand the passion that drove her, and together, they would seek counseling to help navigate this new chapter in their relationship. As Sophia unpacked her suitcase in the guest house that evening, she felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The path ahead was still uncertain, but at least now they were facing it with honesty and open communication. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rediscovery and negotiation. Sophia threw herself into her work with renewed focus, no longer burdened by the need to hide her passion. The community center project was entering its final phases, and the excitement in the East Side neighborhood was palpable. One crisp Saturday morning, as Sophia reviewed plans for the center's rooftop garden, she heard a knock at the guest house door. To her surprise, it was Jackson, dressed casually and holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, offering her a cup. "And I was hoping, maybe I could see what you're working on." Sophia blinked in surprise, then smiled, gesturing him inside. "Of course. Come in." For the next hour, Sophia walked Jackson through her plans, explaining the sustainable design elements and the programs the center would offer. To her amazement, Jackson listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering insights from his own experience in real estate development. "This is really impressive, Sophia," he said finally, studying the 3D model on her computer. "I had no idea you were capable of something like this." The words stung a little, but Sophia could see the genuine admiration in Jackson's eyes. "I'm not sure I knew either," she admitted, "but it feels right, like this is what I was always meant to do." Jackson nodded slowly. "I can see that, and I'm sorry it took me so long to really look." As they continued to talk, Sophia felt a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. Over the following weeks, Jackson became a more frequent visitor to the construction site. He was there the day the solar panels were installed on the roof, listening intently as Sophia explained how they would significantly reduce the center's energy costs. He attended community meetings, witnessing firsthand the impact Sophia's work was having on the neighborhood. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner in the main house, something that had become a weekly tradition, Jackson surprised Sophia with a proposal. "I've been thinking," he said, setting down his fork. "What if Hawthorne Developments created a new division focused on sustainable, community-oriented projects? And what if you led it?" Sophia stared at him, speechless. "Are you serious?" Jackson nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Completely. Your work here has opened my eyes, Sophia. There's a real need for this kind of development, and you have the vision to make it happen. Plus," he added, his smile widening, "I hear the architect is pretty talented." Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes as the implications of Jackson's offer sank in. It wasn't just a job opportunity. It was an acknowledgement of her skills, a way to bridge their two worlds. "Jackson, I don't know what to say." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Say you'll think about it. We can figure out the details together. Make sure it aligns with your values and vision. I want us to be partners, Sophia, in every sense of the word." As Sophia looked into Jackson's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in years, a genuine excitement for the future, one they could build together. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but for the first time in months, Sophia felt like they were truly facing them as a team. The next morning, as Sophia walked through the nearly completed community center, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This building, born from her rekindled passion and nurtured by the support of the Eastside community, represented more than just a professional achievement. It was a symbol of her personal transformation, of her journey from shadows into light. As she stepped out onto the rooftop garden, breathing in the crisp autumn air, Sophia allowed herself to imagine the future. She saw herself leading Hawthorne Developments, new sustainable division, working alongside Jackson to create meaningful change in communities across the city. She saw their marriage, stronger and more equal than ever before, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. The path ahead was still uncertain, but Sophia was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had rediscovered her passion, reclaimed her identity, and in the process, had found a way to build a bridge between her dreams and her reality. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the city, Sophia smiled. She was ready to step fully into the light of her own making, with Jackson by her side. The day of the community center's grand opening dawned bright and clear. Sophia stood in front of the mirror in the guest house, adjusting her blazer and taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. This was the culmination of months of hard work, late nights, and personal transformation. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Jackson, looking sharp in a suit, a small gift box in his hand. "You ready for the big day?" he asked, stepping inside. Sophia nodded, managing a smile despite her nervousness. "As ready as I'll ever be." Jackson held out the box. I have something for you. A little good luck charm. Curious, Sophia opened it to find a beautiful silver pendant in the shape of an architect's compass. Her eyes welled up as she recognized it as a replica of the one her father had given her when she got into architecture school. Jackson, how did you... He smiled softly. I called your sister. She helped me find the original design. I thought you should have something to remind you of where you started, now that you're embarking on this new chapter. Touched by the gesture, Sophia let Jackson fasten the necklace around her neck. As she looked in the mirror, the pendant resting just above her heart, she felt a sense of coming full circle. Thank you, she whispered, squeezing his hand. For this, and for everything. The community center was buzzing with excitement as they arrived. Colorful banners hung from the eco-friendly facade, and the rooftop garden was in full bloom. Community members, city officials, and media representatives milled about, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Sophia spotted Elena in the crowd and waved her over. The two women embraced, both a little teary-eyed. Can you believe it? Elena said, gesturing to the building around them. You did it, Sophia. You really did it. Sophia shook her head, smiling. We did it. All of us. Together. As Sophia took her place at the podium to give her speech, she felt a moment of panic. But then she saw Jackson in the crowd, giving her an encouraging nod, and Elena beaming with pride. She took a deep breath and began to speak. A year ago, I stood in the shadows of someone else's life, feeling lost and unfulfilled, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. This center represents more than just a building. It's a symbol of transformation, not just for this community, but for me personally. She went on to talk about the center's sustainable design, the programs it would offer, and the positive impact it would have on the neighborhood. But more than that, she spoke about the power of community, of pursuing one's passions, and of the courage it takes to step into the light of one's true self. As applause filled the air and the ribbon was cut, Sophia felt a profound sense of accomplishment and joy. She had done more than just build a community center. She had rebuilt herself. In the months that followed the center's opening, Sophia's life transformed in ways she never could have imagined a year ago. She took Jackson up on his offer to lead Hawthorne Development's new sustainable division, throwing herself into the work with passion and purpose. Their marriage, too, entered a new phase. With open communication and a renewed commitment to supporting each other's dreams, Sophia and Jackson found a balance they had been missing for years. They still had their disagreements, but now they faced them as true partners, each valuing the other's perspective and strengths. One evening, as they shared a quiet dinner on their patio, overlooking the city lights, Jackson raised his glass in a toast. To new beginnings, he said, his eyes twinkling, and to the amazing woman who had the courage to pursue them. Sophia clinked her glass against his, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. And to the man who learned to grow alongside her, she added softly. As they talked about their days, Sophia's plans for a new affordable housing project, Jackson's ideas for expanding their sustainable initiatives, Sophia marveled at how far they had come. The woman who had stood in the shadows at last year's Christmas party seemed like a distant memory. Later that night, as she stood in her home office, no longer hidden away in the guest house, Sophia's eyes fell on a framed photo on her desk. It showed her and Jackson at the community center's opening, both beaming with pride. Next to it sat her father's compass, a reminder of where she had started and how far she had come. Sophia picked up the compass, running her fingers over its smooth surface. She thought of her father, now fully recovered and endlessly proud of her accomplishments. She thought of Elena and the other community members whose lives had been touched by the center. And she thought of Jackson, who had learned to see her in a new light and love her more fully for it. With a smile, Sophia turned out the light and headed to bed, ready to face whatever new challenges and opportunities tomorrow might bring. The Hawthorne mansion was once again filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses as Vancouver's elite gathered for the annual Christmas party. But this year, things were different. Sophia stood near the grand fireplace, but instead of feeling invisible, she was the center of attention. A small crowd had gathered around her as she enthusiastically described Hawthorne Development's latest sustainable project, a series of affordable, eco-friendly homes designed to revitalize a struggling neighborhood. Jackson watched from across the room, a proud smile on his face. As he made his way to her side, he overheard snippets of conversation. "Brilliant design, Mrs. Hawthorne. Setting a new standard for responsible development. Can't wait to see what you'll do next." As the crowd dispersed, Jackson slipped an arm around Sophia's waist. "Looks like someone's stealing the show," he teased gently. Sophia laughed, leaning into him. "Well, I learned from the best, didn't I?" Just before midnight, Jackson clinked his glass for the traditional toast. But this time, as all eyes turned to him, he did something unexpected. "Friends, colleagues, esteemed guests," he began, his voice warm. "Thank you all for joining us in celebrating another fantastic year. But tonight, I want to talk about something more important than business success. I want to talk about growth, about the courage to change, and about the power of true partnership." He turned to Sophia, extending his hand. As she joined him, he continued. "A year ago, my amazing wife reminded me of something I had forgotten, that we are at our best when we pursue our passions, when we use our talents to make a real difference in the world. Sophia," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "thank you for having the courage to step into the light. You've not only transformed your own life, but inspired change in all of us." As applause filled the room, Sophia felt tears pricking at her eyes. She looked out at the gathered crowd, no longer feeling like a prop or an accessory, but a woman fully in command of her own story. Later, as the last guests departed and the house grew quiet, Sophia and Jackson stood on their balcony, looking out over the twinkling lights of Vancouver. Sophia's hand went to the compass pendant around her neck, a reminder of how far she had come. "What are you thinking?" Jackson asked softly. Sophia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm thinking about light," she said. "About how sometimes we have to step out of the shadows to find it, and about how much brighter it is when we have someone to share it with." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms and the promise of the future, Sophia knew that her journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new projects, new dreams to pursue. But she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had found her light, her purpose, her true self. And with Jackson by her side, she was ready to shine brighter than ever before. What did you think of Sophia's story? Please leave a comment with your opinion. 2 buttons will appear next to it. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and another to watch other exciting stories. Make your choice. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.